Right, so there's nothing else to do than just hit it. Let's go for it, mate.
Yeah, okay.
Let's go for it. So,
Go.
let's just go and do a general introduction. This is where I think, okay, I'll wait for Paul to go first and then JW, and I'm like, hang on.
Yeah. With the introduction, you just say my name and a little bit about what I do, or just...
Yeah, we'll just talk and introduce. Yeah, so, I'll just go, hello, everyone. Welcome back to a SparkyNinja podcast. This is a little bit of a revamp of our format, in that it's the two of us regularly, and we may get some other people in now and then. It is not a end of the E5 podcast or anything like that. It's just something that we're going to do in between whilst we then do the bigger work for the E5 work pieces in the meantime. So you probably noticed Dave, our little co-host here, who's been on the E5 stuff. But Dave, just introduce yourself so people who don't know you a bit better.
Hello, I'm Dave Betteridge. I moderate the SparkyNinja groups, as you may well know. I am a QS for a company. Do a lot of compliance and design, and a lot of health and safety bits and bobs.
Yeah, needless to say, mate. I mean, you've on the Discord and the Facebook, you've been an awful lot more active in recent years than I have. So it's this is just something that we just feel like it's fun to do. Really, it's kind of because we often catch up or we often talk online, but we just thought we'd just do this kind of just to have this nice little commitment to catching up and just talking stuff, talking industry. But yep, so this is Dave and Dave. So I guess what we're going to just call ourselves. I'll just refer to me as Ninja and refer to you as Betteridge or Mr. B or what?
Mr. B, Betteridge.
All right, cool.
Yeah, Betteridge.
So if you're going to message or complain or talk to us, just say, oh wait, Betteridge or Ninja, that Betteridge is smarter and all that stuff. Just say what you need to say. And we'll move on. Now, we are going to have a regular format where we talk about, the same kind of things, and then we may do one now and then where we cover a larger piece. Obviously, the bigger pieces of work we'll be doing will be pushing to the E5 stuff, and those will be carrying on as normal. This is just something we're going to do more regularly in the middle, really. So what have you been up to this past week, mate?
Yeah, I've had a busy, eventful week. I started my week off with tender documents, going over pre-designs and checking the client's GA drawings, seeing if I could put any feedback into it. I then assist and help the PMs on site with their ongoing projects and works, as I usually design most of the projects for the company. So I hear sometimes, when you do like designs and things, there are like stages of designs or there's stages of progress to contracts. Is that something that you're experienced with? Yeah, it's usually the REBA kind of chartered architect kind of format. And so we start with the...
So it's like you do an initial effort and then they return it, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah, it's a lot of bouncing forward and back. You put your ideas onto paper, and then sometimes they don't really work out because they clash with the mechanical side of things, maybe. The work profiles, maybe the cost and budget for the type of containment system you're using or wiring system that you're implementing.
And you're given like an initial budget, are you, or an expectation of budget?
To be honest, when I start the design off, it's pretty much open checkbook, and then obviously they
start culling it.
Basically, yeah, you know. We have me and our contracts manager, and the battle of the two. He supports me, I support him, and we try and get to a point where we don't obviously outprice ourselves on the job, but still in compliance.
Which is easy to do, though, when you try to uphold a standard. It's very easy for you to find yourself one of very few contractors, because there's an awful lot out there that'll just have immediate either misunderstandings of standards, or they just will have lower levels of standards. So it's quite tough out there, isn't it? Depends, obviously, the scale of the contracts you're trying to get designs for. But so that's what you've been doing the last week. What I do in a future one is actually go more into the design process and stuff. We've got the design course coming up in a few weeks, and so there's probably some people who are getting ahead in the game for that. You've done yours, haven't you? Yeah. You've passed yours.
Oh, it was very, very good fun. That was. I must admit, it's a very good course. I wish it was more design. Inputted into it.
It's too heavy on regs, and I think the actual exam is it needs to be broken down a little bit. But I agree. I agree. I think the large scale EV design actually is a bit more fun in that aspect with regards to utilizing what's in the regs or knowing where the regulations kind of isn't any helpful anymore. This kind of ties on to what I got up to, because I went to Telford to deliver the large scale EV course. I went to Hager's facility, and they have this training academy, and they it's kind of like a handshake relationship where we'll pay obviously the costs of catering and things, but they let the room be available, for free otherwise. But the learners and the team that you bring in, they then like to take them on a little tour of the factory, kind of showing the benefit of Hager's technology in the manufacturing process. And what they make in the Telford factory is the actual panels and the consumer units, and the big panels and the domestic boards. All the protected devices are made over in Germany and France, and they're brought over, but the enclosures are made there, and it's quite a fascinating little tour. So we'll be looking at doing some more training courses there. We may even get in the you remember we did a Discord meetup down at as ACO, didn't we? Remember that?
Yes.
Where I had to abandon ship halfway through due to city and guilds. Them in pain in the ass. But yeah, no, so I'm thinking about maybe having another Discord grouping or gathering at Telford, just go around the factory and have a little do some they've offered some free CPD talks. There's all sorts that's going on right now with protection. They've just started talking about the type B RCD, the heat pumps with the higher frequencies and things. The HP type B RCD that was just been pushed by them. So yeah, that's what I got up to. And I did I did the design course on that. They all did reasonably well. There were a couple of nervous Nellies in there because the calculations are a bit challenging. But we did that. That's what I've been up to. And I actually then on the way back on Friday, I managed to pop into Elex at Hager.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I got to pop into Elex at Hager.
How did you find Elex these days?
Do I think it was an opportunity to just pop in. I got in about 11ish. I had a little quick walk around. I caught a couple of the talks, and these guys doing the talks, they have to repeat themselves so much. And Napit had done one on PV, and they were talking about the DC isolator. And we had this Marcy 69 document or something that was saying that we shouldn't be putting DC isolators in because we should just be using the ones on inverters. And they were sternly saying, no, we disagree with this. We think that obviously maintainability and the need to put a DC isolator on the actual array to isolate the DC array from the inverter as a separate device is much more of a better standard of work, which I have to agree. So that's what they were kind of pushing as an argument. The IT were there doing, I caught the back end of theirs, so I can't actually remember what they were all talking about. It was stuff that, all sorts of technical jargon really, renewables really, isn't it? All talk about renewables, and basically, they've got these books out, so talking about things that warrant the purchase of these books. Oh, actually, I got a copy of this heat pump book. I don't know where it is. I'll have to read it. That small one.
Is it going to be one they possibly have on the Vital Source? I hope
it is on the Vital. It is on the Vital Source. That's how I actually read it the first time round. I read it on the Vital Source, and then when I was there, they offered me a copy, which was good because they weren't really selling books. I managed to get a copy of that. I wanted to get James Eads' book. He's updated to 7909, which is one of my little areas I play in. But they weren't actually selling physical books there, which was a little frustrating because I went there with all this money. I ended up giving it all to TIS for PV test kit, which is so expensive. The crimper, the tester, the clamp meter. It was like 500 odd quid with like show discounts and stuff. And I was like, crikey, and I felt so bad. I walked past Q-Tech with these TIS bags. And I get on well with the guys at Q-Tech. They looked at me with this like, you've got TIS bags. I went, hang on, it's all PV stuff. You don't sell PV stuff. I went, oh, okay. And I bought an EV adapter just because I felt guilty. Because I'm quite fond of Q-Tech as a tester. They got this nice little new kit. I'll be getting that soon. But no, so I popped in, and I had a chat. I had a chat with Graham Kenyon about the EV course and about the reactance calculations and stuff, and got some good feedback about how it is and how they can't really do much with it, because obviously, as you know, this the the EV large scale sector kind of leaves 7671 and it goes on to the ERA calculations, which are experimental calculations carried out in the 70s and such. I've got the thermoplastic and thermosetting ones. The problem is, those are obviously, that's not property that the IET can just grab and publish in a book. So they are going to have to review this moving forward, because the large scale space isn't really well supported in any IET document at the moment. So that's something that was quite interesting, I thought. So I had a chat with them about what's going on with the qualification moving forward. It's staying as it is as far as we know, but we do need to kind of push outside of 7671 with those. That's what I got up to. I got home.
Didn't pass the Mega stand by any chance with their new EVSE adapter.
Mega weren't there.
Oh, strange.
Yeah, Milwaukee weren't there. Mega weren't there. Because they got this little 13 amp socket adapter testing.
Yeah.
It's got ZS and it's got harmonics and stuff on it. I wanted to grab one of those because I think for 7909 they're a good little thing, because I have to test many sockets. So it's a practical thing. So I was going to grab one of those, but they didn't appear to be there. Not that I could see them anyway. There's a couple of people missing. There was, it was busy. It was all right. There's a couple of people missing, I think. Yeah. So you just been designing and just been kind of do you do much on the tools, or was it just more design and running around?
I was about to say I did actually make the tools this week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah.
So we were doing a fit out for a gym. They're having a new toilet block, and we were doing all the lighting and hand dryers within that. We had a few jobs on, so it was time to get the WD-40 out and get the tools going and see if I still had it.
I had to, unfortunately, the only time I get on the tools these days is building test rigs. So I built one for the solar and one for the battery and stuff. But it's it's nice to get your hands going again after they've been after you've been pushing a pen around for so long. But I did, I went to Elex ready to spend, and there was a couple of Nipex stripping things I got as well. They look pretty handy. But that's what I've been up to, really. Is there anything that you saw, or anything that you wanted to talk about with regards to industry gossip or industry chat on this one?
This week I've been a bit busy with the tools work to pick up my a copy of Professional Electrician for this month, and not really been keeping up with this month's industry news.
I've actually I've read it. I've read the PE one. We'll look at that next week, I think, because obviously before the June one comes out. But there were some good articles on. There's one on the neutral current diversion. There's a piece in there that's been put together by the trade organisations. It's pretty well described, and they've got a nice little flow chart at the end, which kind of, and I'll probably put a snapshot of it here for the video feedback, kind of showing the decision tree about fault finding it, and it's kind of expanding beyond what Guidance Notes 3 says, in that they are looking at the presence of a voltage and stuff at the end as a and it actually has this big red danger potential because it's live work at that point. There's an article in there about, again, heat pump RCDs by Depoke or Dopka, whatever the company is called.
I call him Depoke.
Depoke.
But it's probably not.
And it's just mainly focusing on the fact that heat pumps themselves operate at higher frequencies than what the threshold, or Type B as an RCD is like 1 kilohertz as a bottom line. They have to operate up to 1 kilohertz. They can work higher, but 1 kilohertz is what they have to reach. But obviously these heat pumps can operate much more than that. And so obviously they're saying that a standard B RCD probably wouldn't be deliverable. So these heat pumps go up into the many kilohertz, 150 or so, I think they were talking about. So they did an article, and I know Hager's just brought theirs out. And interestingly, when I was at Hager at Telford, I had a look at one, and I was talking to one of the pools there, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is a new thing." And I looked at the size of it. It's just a single phase RCD, but it's 4 modules big. And I said, "Have you been asked to make it smaller yet?" And he went, "Yeah." All these companies that asked them to make these devices smaller. And I looked at it, And I was like, oh, this must be going for a lot of money. Because I know my Schneider B RCDs that I have were like 300 and odd pound for me to get at the time. And he said, no, these are going to come in and are going to be recommended retail about somewhere around the 150. So it looks like, and they work as a Type B RCD. They're 4 module big. I think Proteus have a smaller one. But fundamentally, that does bring the B RCDs into the game. Because they make them more affordable. Because they are, these heat pump RCDs are a B RCD with added value. So you could use them just when you need a B RCD for any other application. As far as I was told when I asked that exact question, which is good, because it does mean that when we start pushing B RCDs, they are, again, this is the thing, they're going to become more affordable because they're going to become more within reach, and it's heat pumps, we think, that will be doing that, because heat pumps are, obviously, we know, are going to be heavily pushed. We don't have the open pen solution for heat pumps because of the frequency issue. So it looks like heat pumps might be the reason why Type Bs become within affordable reach, very soon. So that I found interesting.
Would those Type Bs be like a B plus setup?
B plus is the mark that was in the VDE standard in Germany, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what the Poke have, but Hager, when I spoke with the Pauls, they obviously haven't done that, because it's a case of what really plus reaches, because it's 1 kilohertz, but plus is more, but when? So what they've done is they've called it a HP, a Type B HP, so Type B directed for heat pumps. And I think it was Valent was the company that had requested this device be put onto the market to help, obviously, with their push for heat pumps. And so they've called it HP for heat pump selection. But the question is, the heat pump selection goes up to the 150 kilohertz, I think it is. If not, I'll put a quote to say I'm wrong. But the plus could be anywhere from 1 kilohertz up to there. It's a case of where it stops. But obviously this one is designed to actually be suitable for the heat pumps, which are very high frequency. So again, this is just from memory. I need to really read up and actually do anything before I really talk about it on a podcast. But I found it interesting. I found it interesting that that's something that's coming into reach, and that science can become more economically accessible for all other applications where Type B will be needed, which is a lot in the future.
This mean 7671 is going to need a bit of a rewrite because it only goes up to 400 hertz.
Well, yeah. There's, again, we had a little talk about the work, and we had all these, because obviously there was a lad, Curtis from the ECA was on the large scale course as well, one of their ECA's technical guys. So there's an awful lot of good open conversations about things that are going on. Obviously, they've got to be very careful what they discuss about what's going on with 7671, but there is a lot going on, and we know that they're rewriting, obviously, this whole point about generator sets and obviously prosumerisms being introduced. So they're obviously part 5 is going to have a bit of a shake up. But hey, it just means that we've got a little bit more stuff to talk about over the course of the next year.
Yeah.
All right, so this next little bit we want to discuss is CPD. Now, you and I have quite a knack for just learning crap. We find it interesting, we find it useful, and most of it we can then apply at work. So what I wanted to kind of discuss here was if there's any kind of CPD resource you've found which the listeners can go, oh, okay, that sounds useful. Because when we just mentioned Professional Electrician Magazine, which is definitely a good resource for CPD. I think you get like a CPD token or something that you can then use towards your... Because the CPS, they now obviously have to track this, don't they?
Yeah, it's actually been mentioned to me recently by somebody recently that they were on their assessment, and they have been asking for logs of the CPD for their engineers. I think, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think actually the Electrotechnical Assessment Specification has added some instruction or demand on that. So the CPS has to be very proactively pushing the contractors, and really this should be relative to every individual under the contractor, not just the contractor, for them to have CPD, which is vocationally targeted. So it's relative. So again, there's so much that's out there now in the renewable space, for example. But a lot of the CPD is, some of it's, sales driven. But that's why, again, things like this Type B RCD and the open pen protection, that kind of CPD is quite valuable because it's actually very important. Just yesterday on the Facebook group, I was talking, there was a post about putting in an EV charger, and, I said, well, you must read the IT code of practice as a minimum, because he was deciding whether or not to do training. And I was like, you just need to read the IT code so you can then understand the industry expectation that you will, if you choose to separate your earthing systems, you will risk assess that. And then fundamentally, with anything, if we risk assess something and we're using that risk assessment to achieve protection, we have to make sure that there is an ongoing strategy to maintain that risk assessment. Because if you put something in to achieve protection, then a year later Doris puts something in, or another trade puts something in that compromises that risk. Forward thinking, we're going to have to, if we do EICRs or anything, we're going to have to be able to go back to that risk assessment and reassess it. And I think this is something that most EV installs where they've done the separation of earthing systems haven't done very well. This will also include, on-street charging. But then if you flip that and you do the open pen, we've got that whole DOC, Declaration of Conformity, guff, where we need to, identify the issue with 61851 and 8.4 and the switching of the earth. All of this is kind of covered in the IT COP, and I think there were a few annoying posts, and I felt like deleting them, but I don't do that. I'm nice. I let people be idiots within reason in the groups. But there are a few.
I did see that one.
Yeah, there are a few posts going, it's just a radial circuit, and it's just this on this
socket. It's easy.
We don't want to overcomplicate things, which is, some people go, really, it's all you like to do. We don't, but we just want to make sure that people, if we want to obviously make sure that electricians, push themselves further along, that we give them the right information. And this is something the industry hasn't really done much to tell them. It's in the IT book, but the industry itself hasn't done much to educate electricians, because there's obviously, without me saying too much, there are economical interests from manufacturers to make us buy their stuff. There are partnerships at play, and so if our trade organisations start to say that manufacturer, and that manufacturer, you require a declaration of conformity, whilst this one you can do this and you can do this, this creates a problem when it comes to internal relationships in our industry, and so we just don't get anywhere with that. And so an awful lot of electricians have been misinformed, poorly trained. When all you got to do is read the IT code of practice and read 7671, and just the words are in there, and just determine for yourself what you're going to do. And I think moving forward, that's something that we're going to have to, probably at future talks, we're going to have to look at how we're going to look back at this installation that's going on, and then code issues. There's an awful lot of poor PV, and there's an awful lot of poor EV. But we have this problem where we have this huge push right now to install all this stuff, where we still haven't really determined the best way to do it.
It's an interesting one, EVSE, because you're taking a big structure of metal earth to a system to the outside of the equal potential zone, which causes a massive shock risk problem. And then you've got all this open pen, and if you're not careful, you might exceed the volts drop limit and start activating it under nuisance tripping, so you need your 3% volts drop. You start have to take all these things into consideration, and there's a lot of, when you start looking at the COP and the regulations behind it, there's a lot of safety aspects to an EVSE. That
there is. And the thing is, this
more
book
than
is,
a socket.
What is it now, in its 5th edition right now?
Yes.
And really, it should really have a 6th, because there's been so much movement since that was published. But that's only a year old. That is the problem. There's an awful lot of this information. This is why CPD is important, and it's because, well, we have the publication. We always need to look at what's moving on. We had the same problem with Largescale EV, where the code of practice said this, but the industry has done that. And from a training perspective, if I have people come into the training room, I've got this problem. There's what the industry is doing, there's what the book says, and then there's what the qualification asks. And those are not always the same thing. And whilst I need to prepare them to be assessed effectively, I also want them to realise what the actual industry is doing. And that's one of the fun aspects of this. So CPD, yes, good resources of CPD. What have you got I mean, I'm going to mention Professional Electrician magazine because I literally read one, and then I went to an Elex, and I found that resourceful. That was my CPD. 2 weeks ago was the Elex. Last week, I read the magazine while I was in the office waiting for a delivery. What have you been up to?
Well, several of mine are not really free. I do use the Snyder library quite a lot. I do find that pretty good, and the products and the ecoskeleton kind of setup with the power tags and the interesting document L2 and what it states about lighting being monitored per circuit, which is one of my design considerations at the moment, is how I'm going to implement that kind of thing. And does it really need to be on every single lighting circuit? Can it just be one distribution board for lighting with a meter?
So what's the purpose of the monitoring?
Conservation of energy, I'm assuming it's going to be all about. With all our LED now, I don't really see energy being used on lighting like it used to. I still find, I suppose, with the lighting volts drop calculation and the limits, the 3% 6.9 volts on your lighting is a bit old school maybe, but then you still got inrush.
It is. Yeah, exactly. And that is the thing. Normally it's not so much the demand and the volt drop, it's more about the inrush, because again, all of these things have LED drivers, and you have or if you have other like high frequency ballasts, you can only have so many of them switched on at a single time unless you then break it down. And I think more of this isn't so much about energy efficiency in that respect. It's probably more about the continuity of supply and division of installation as well. It depends obviously inherently on what protection you've got. You know, if you don't need RCDs due to your methods of installation and your wiring systems, then you're golden. If your earthing system or anything else pushes the RCDs, then you need even more division. Interestingly, though, one thing I discussed on I can't remember what course it was. I think it was the Largescale course. We talked about lamp life. Yeah, we talked about lamp life on design, because obviously all lamps have a life, and we're supposed to, when we do our design, provide our client or the person utilising the electrical installation an understanding on when they should start the economical strategy of replacing the lamps. We shouldn't replace them when they blow, because that can create dangerous work light patterns and so forth. None of us really do that though, do we? But we're supposed to. But interestingly, when I was talking on the Largescale EV, there's in the IT design guide, there's a bit on cable life, which I'm starting to explore, these calculations on cable life. Because when I think about the issues we've got with the DNO, life expiry, phenolic degradation and all these things, and I think, okay, we're starting to take circuits. Let's take a typical domestic street. You may have a cable that's 40, 50 years old, and it's been probably pulling maybe circa 14 amps on average a day due to utilization behavior of the tenant. And now suddenly they have an EV charger with something like one of these current sensors, let's say, for example, a My Energy one, which allows them to pull that 30 amp or whatever they can get out of their 60 amp fuse or 100 amp fuse. Yeah? So we're putting that extra strain on these cables, and they're probably already fairly aged. So I'm going to start. It's like it's more of a thing in my head. I haven't really started doing it yet, but I'm going to start looking at these calculations in the IET design guide to try to determine what the exponential fall of the life will be when we suddenly start stressing them with these increased demands that electrification is pushing on them. Because we can't be surprised when all of a sudden the number of cable failures starts to increase when we're putting larger demands on there for longer periods of time. You know, cable life is a thing. They don't have an infinite life, but it's one of those things that I think we're going to start to see an awful lot of an issue with if we don't really, in our designs, get more conscious to this. And if we work on an existing system and we redesign it and the existing supply is circa 30, 40 years old, there's going to be diminished life on that cable. And if we suddenly just go, let's just squeeze more out of this thing, we're going to shorten it. It may not be instant, but if we're predicting a 25-year life in our well-designed system, we may be stressing systems that the cable of the distribution may fail within 10, 15 years. You know, this is what I want to do these calculations for, to really get a better understanding of what impact squeezing as much more life out of the cable can do. You know, so that's what I'm going to start doing moving forward from a CPD perspective. All right,
that's a good one.
It's interesting. It's a case of finding the time to put it in to practice.
We tend to think about our installations as just our house that we're in or the factory we're in. We don't really think about the neighbouring properties or the whole network infrastructure. And what actually is coming in is actually, like you say, 50 odd years old, and what we got in here might be new.
It could all be
you don't
nice.
Think about out there.
Yeah, it could all be nice, brand new and shiny, and smell terrific. But if the cable feeding it
must be gold cable,
is old and tired, it will probably punish you later on. And again, you just you could be the problem because you're the person who put this demand on it. So we should be just aware of it, and that's something I want to start looking into, and add something to the design course if I can. All right. Speaking of, obviously, you mentioned our community. Has there been anything in our community? This is one of your jobs, really, is to kind of go right. Let's look at the community, SparkyNinja community, Facebook, whatever. And is there a conversation that you wanted us to discuss, just to kind of add some value to? What do you got?
There's always good questions on the group and challenging questions, and some of them get your mind going and maybe past what the poster has put up. One of them was by a member. When using metallic copex, does it require to be earthed? Going from plastic isolator to a supply of metal heat pump. I find this interesting because under 5432.3, we're not meant to use the metallic copex as a protective conductor.
Yeah, it says.
So that led me.
It says flexible conduit can't be used or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, flexible conduit. Flexible metallic parts or conduit cannot be, or pliable, flexible cannot be used basically as a protective conductor. So then it led me on to think a little bit past what the poster was probably thinking of. Is what happens if you put single insulated cables inside that metal copex?
Oh, okay. So I haven't got the regs in front of me. Damn.
Now, it could be that the copex is not moved much, and there's probably low chance of it shorting.
I mean, fundamentally, we know the purpose of that wiring system is to account for equipment that has vibration. So we're not really supposed to. I mean, I think I saw. Oh god, I think I saw Richard post about this.
Yeah, he did.
Quality guy. This wasn't his question. He just posted. He was frustrated with all these people putting copex throughout buildings and stuff. Yeah, and I completely agree. We're really only supposed to use it to go from a fixed isolation point to a piece of equipment that vibrates, motors and so forth. That's really what it's for. And I know that you've just quoted a reg, so you've obviously looked into this. Yes, there's a regulation that says we're not supposed to use flexible conduit as a protective conductor.
Yeah,
so the question is, you've got an insulated enclosure, then you're going to a metal pump, so you need to get earth to it. And are they just using... Yeah. So they're just suggesting to earth the copex and use the copex to earth that? Is that what they're saying?
I think what they're saying is even require it. Right. I mean, if you put like a double insulated cable, or deemed to be double insulated inside of it, technically speaking, it's that debate whether a conduit and a wall needs earthing.
I mean, if it's metal copex, it's going to potentially be an exposed conductive part. So I think, and then don't misquote me on this, I think the answer is we would recommend to put a protective conductor in, ideally in the conduit, not next to it because that'll look crap. So run another protective conductor in, so there's a solidly connected conductor to the actual load. But I think we are supposed to also earth the copex, but not use it as a protective conductor for the circuit. So we'd have a dedicated protective conductor in the copex, because obviously the flex, and that copex is just like one long flexing thing. But we would earth it so that if there was an insulation fault in the actual single in it, then it would, if anything, basically if it becomes live, it needs to be earthed at the accessible points so that earth fault protection happens. But what we don't want to rely on is it itself to provide the low negligible impedance to deliver the high fault current for ADS. So we need to have a connected cable in there to take that back so that there is a low impedance for fault clearance to be done. It itself would suck because there would be a impedance from that movement and it probably wouldn't be so good. So I think that's what I would interpret that to be. Put a cable in it, but also still earth it. It's not bonding, obviously, but earth it, but don't use it. So put an earth through it. I think that's what that's what I interpret that as. That's an interesting one. It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it was an interesting one.
Did the community respond well with that, or was it like there wasn't any abuse or anything?
No, we don't really
nice.
Get abuse in the Ninja forums.
Oh, we try to
get rid of that before it escalates.
We try our best.
It does happen sometimes, but not all the time.
Oh, cool, mate. Cool. All right. This is a bit where you're going to educate me. We're going to talk about a standard of your choosing.
Oh, well, lovely. Well, we'll go for 7454. Short circuit with non-adiabatic effect.
7454. Now you've talked to me about this one before.
Yeah,
Is this
I'm
the one
playing
you
around with
did
things.
something on the whiteboard when you were in my centre? You did this long thing. Was it this? Was it from this?
Yes. Well, kind of. That was me playing around with. Can I put a 1.5 onto a B32 device? Basically.
I took a photo. I still haven't progressed all. I still haven't actually, kind of processed all of that because that was quite impressive. The calculations you were doing. Okay, so go through it. Tell me what 7454 is about.
Well, what started me on my journey was 434.5.2, the time thermal constraint for short circuits.
That's protecting against fault current?
Yeah, and it was
T, K squared, S squared, I squared?
Yeah, right. That's it, over I squared. And it got me onto another part of it where, K is the factor taking account of resistivity, temperature, coefficient, and heat capacity of a conductor material. So lots of things in K. It then took me to table 43.1.
Right, so isn't that where we normally would go with 115 or 143 if it's thermoplastic or thermosetting or something? Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, we would go 115. There's other ones in there as well for different types of insulating material.
So what made you go? Oh, 7671's got this, but now I need to go somewhere else. What was the reason?
Two things really. One was the note 2. Other values of K can be determined by reference of 7454. So that made me think, what's in there? Also interested. It's not a very big standard. I think it's about 9 pages. There's a lot of math in it. A lot of sigma, alpha, beta.
Oh gosh.
Theta. There's lots of calculation to it.
Yes.
But the other reason I went to it was the heading in the top of table 43.1, where it went on to say values of K common materials for the calculation effects of fault current for the disconnection times up to 5 seconds.
Ah, I see. So you'll want to go above 5 seconds.
Well, it got me thinking, what happens if we do a calculation? The cable withstands the time, but it's still over 5 seconds.
Right.
So it got me on to 7454.
So you tell me if I'm doing a design I'm like over 5 seconds, I have to use this, and I can't use what's in 7671.
Well, it seems to be a limit. Seems to be a limit because you can't use that K no longer by the looks of this for anything over 5 seconds, because up to 5 seconds. Not that you really want a cable in a fault condition lasting for over 5 seconds anyway. Not for exposed conductive parts, but.
But again, I mean, this is 434, so this could also apply to line to neutral short circuits, couldn't it? And I remember I do this example in the training where I was at a site and I had a C32 radial socket outlet circuit, and I was measuring the earth fault loops and stuff as normal, doing an EICR, and when you have an EICR and you do your ZSs and suddenly your ZSs go too high, but you've got 30 milliamp hour CDs, so suddenly this magical 1667 pops up, and we go, don't worry, we throw 167 in there. That's obviously referring to the 30 milliamp on a TT system. That doesn't apply for short circuit or line to neutral, because we're not relying on an earth leakage. And so I've a few times had to use the T equals K squared S squared over I squared calculation from 434 to determine how long it would take for that, because the point of that formula there is we're trying to determine the time it will take to go from the operating temperature, which is, let's say, thermoplastic, 70 degrees at the point of fault, and then there's a final temperature which we'll get to, which I think for thermoplastic is 160. 90 degrees is
160.
And 90 degrees is 250. Now, when we have a fault that goes for a longer period of time, then we have to make sure that we'll disconnect quicker than that. So we determine that time. So let's say it's 7 seconds or so. We have to then determine our circuit will operate quicker. So it is interesting that we'll have to use different factors if our disconnection time is going to be longer than 5 seconds. So that has annoyed me slightly, because it means an awful lot of my online design course may need tweaking.
But the interesting thing about it as well in that is that it disconnects over 5, but when you go to 7454, it's actually a non-adiabatic effect, so it's actually relying on not holding the heat inside the insulating material, but actually going out to other sources. Maybe it's touching a plasterboard wall, or it's loads of air around it, or the insulation method maybe is air.
So does it have limitations on the wiring systems it's applicable for then? Because
it looks to, yes.
Some wiring systems wouldn't be useful for that, would they? Because they're going to suffocate the thing.
Yeah, in trunking, where it's sort of bunched, you're probably going to think, well, is that going to be non-adiabatic? There's a fair chance it's going to stay in the insulating around it. There's nowhere for the heat to go. It's surrounded. It could be the one cable just so happens to be in the middle of the whole bunch of cables. Interestingly, the time in 7454, it just basically doesn't give you a max time then, but it does say conductor is less than 10 mil squared.
Okay.
So
there's a different characteristic when you go over that. Okay, that's food for thought.
You go into the calculation side of things, and there's all sorts going on in there.
Okay,
you can get a K of 226, for example.
Okay, so coming back to the beginning of this, so 7671 wasn't quite suitable fully because you had a longer than 5 second time. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that's why you had to then look at this. This is obviously a British standard, so this is a costly thing. Did you find any other means, maybe manufacturer data, cable manufacturer data, or anything that would use the data in that standard, so electricians who maybe want to look into this haven't got to go to the BSI and give them loads of their money? Did you find any other resource, or did you have to literally...
No, I must admit, I'd seen the note too and paid for it. Well, I paid for it a long time. It wasn't the most dearest... it was 154 quid. But it wasn't the most dearest standard that I've possibly bought. 7430 probably was one of my favourite at 380 odd quid. So yeah, I'm a little bit crazy.
Well, that's one of the weird things about us. But no, what we'll do is we'll try to see if we can find other resources. I know, like when we had this issue with what was it? It was the leakage, the division of installation, and the leakage. The 30%, wasn't it, for the RCDs? We were like, oh, how do we know what the protective conductor current is and all this equipment? And then we found the Schneider document that had a lovely table that kind of summarised an awful lot of those product standards. So we will do our best to see if we can find freely available manufacturer data to kind of also support as CPD, because it does take a bit of a mick if we expect electricians to buy all of these standards. What's your opinion on these anyway? As we're starting this kind of relaunch, we're going to talk about standards regularly, because we have access to standards. Why do you have access to standards?
I think it's just wanting to, you're that curious, I just want to know feeling, and it's behind the paywall, and you just end up going, oh, I'm just going to buy it to find out. And then most of the time get majorly disappointed when you get into some of them, because they're, like I say, this is only 9 pages long. It isn't a guidance note.
I remember when we had this problem with E5, because we work as consultants, so we have certain contracts where we have access to some of them. We have some libraries where we have access to them, but sometimes there's not enough. There's always another standard. There's always another standard that's not quite in your library. I remember when Paul Skirm was with us, he did this lovely bit of work looking into some issues that we had with an upcoming version of 7671, and he actually went to the Estonian website, which was obviously where he could obtain the IEC kind of document, all legally above board and all this stuff. We've never done anything hooky, but there it was much more affordable, and it was literally copy and paste the IEC standard. So there are ways to get standards without having to spend too much money. But the best way is obviously if you're with a CPS, they do offer
Yes.
Was it like £100 a year or something like that? And it's
ECA is £100.
Yeah.
NAPIT's around about the same. We are NAPIT, ECA, and NIC. I'm not sure about the NIC. I never checked, but the ECA definitely have a library that you can purchase.
We will in this series of podcasts, we will hover around an awful lot of the ones in that subscription, because the idea of us covering standards is to try and find ones that we have used, but also try to find ones that we know electricians should consider. This I know won't be in those because this is quite a unique one. But if you have a membership and you do purchase the library that they offer, and they don't obviously offer this particular one or one that you are interested in, you can contact them and they can give you some non-committal consultancy and support, but they won't buy it for you, that's for sure.
The IET do an access to a library, but you can only read only for members, but you can only read only.
Yeah,
there's no downloading or
it's
keeping.
Also worth looking at your local library. I live up in the northeast, so I have Durham. There's an online library, and the online library they have has a BSI. It's all read only, but that's all you need to do to learn if the standards are applicable to what you need. That's half the journey. Is going, oh, here's a standard. What does it mean? You can go and read it with these online libraries, and then if you have to then obviously obtain it, you can then invest in it, as long as it's worth the investment. And you can't invest in all of them because it's just too many of them. That's one of the things I did with my EV charging course, is obviously I saw these little issues with 61851-1, 61851-23, 24, and I went, okay, BS library, and then I actually decided, okay, it's relevant to my training need, so I then invested in the standard, and then I obviously have added that value to the training, and I tell people on the course, here's a problem, here's an issue, here's a solution, and then they go, I didn't know about this, and that's because you just put the extra work in. So it is all available. It's sometimes you have to do a little bit of work, and the key thing is, and we'll talk about 767 a lot, but we'll also talk beyond 7671 on this podcast. This is not something, we're not trying to overcomplicate the industry. We're trying to just open your eyes up a little bit more as to what there is to learn and what there is to know, and how relative it is to your work. The last thing you want to do is just be, told if you're acceptable, or told what you need to do by your CPS. I guess that's what we've been doing that too much. Speaking of CPS, yes, I am not with one, because obviously I just run a consultancy and a training company. I was an educational associate of the ECA. They have stopped that because an awful lot of training companies were just utilising the badge and just taking advantage, taking the piss, basically. I had a chat with them recently, because I was interacting with them and I was supporting them, but what they did is they just did this whole cull. So the educational associate thing isn't a thing for training providers anymore, but we're looking at trying to see if we can kind of work together and do some other bits, because they've seen value in the EV training, and they know that it makes sense for me to obviously add value in where it can be added, and it's a good relationship. But I have contacted NAPIT. They gave me a little certificate as a registered training person. I can attend their webinars, and they're good value, but that's all I can get. But so I can't see the benefits of a CPS anymore. I used to run an approved contractor with the NICIC, but that's 10 years ago. So when it comes to what's going on in the land of CPS and CPS assessments, I'm afraid that's your side of the coin on this one, mate.
Yeah, that's all right, mate. Well, like I say, we've passed assessments this year on NAPIT and NICIC. I see the value in having a triangle, as I call it.
Yeah.
The ECA included in that. The ECA I use mainly because I want to have the access to the ecoms for the many staff that we have to maintain.
Ecoms, I've looked at ecoms. It is pretty fancy software. It's pretty good. Do you get a discount on Modesoft as well? Is that right?
I get a discount on Modesoft, which is what I tend to use. I'm not. I don't use Trimble or anything else. I do use separate like AutoCAD and Revit for other things which you don't get a discount for, but you do for electrical OM, and that's helpful because you can integrate OM into Revit.
Yeah,
it's a £1,000 add-on for the year license, but it's clever how it all works together. You can have MagiCAD this side, you can have Revit as the host, and you can have OM over here, and you can draw it on here, and this will do the compliance. It is a powerful bit of software. But you don't necessarily need all that. You can still do it old school. AutoCAD still does its thing. But yeah, you do get benefits for being a member. You do get discount on some training somewhere. There is a sort of localized pot with the ECA for sort of upgrading your staff for the local areas.
The key thing with the ECA though, it's regional, isn't it? So there are different regions,
regional.
and it depends on how active your region is, really. Because I should imagine, some areas it might be a bit more quiet than others, but yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. I think it's understanding. It's trying to understand what they've got to do moving forwards with regards to when you look at, like, we'll talk about this on another podcast when we talk about the changes to training, the experience worker. This is what I've been up to in the past year or so, is trying to help this. We've got TESP that's come out. We've got the experienced worker qualifications coming out. We've got people who have been in the industry for 20, 30 years running jobs who are now told they don't get new cards anymore, who are pissed off, rightfully. So it's trying to find out the right way to get them back on programs so they can get back to work. But it's kind of, there's an awful lot of that's going on, and that's kind of like a little sector of the ECA and NET and all these little people. And they have this big job right now of trying to tidy up an awful lot of the mess the industry's created. And we have to get this done right now, because we need all this renewable stuff has to be installed properly for all this money that's being thrown at it to actually be, not wasted. The EV was an absolute hash at first, wasn't it? There were these courses, these day courses that certain organisations ran, and they trained any man and his dog to put a box on the end of a cable, and then they realised, oh, hang on, there's other issues, and then they pulled it back, and then they got it all done, but it's too late. It's a little too late, and we're going to have this big issue. We're seeing lots of issues with PV installs, battery installs up in the lofts. So we've got all sorts to talk about in upcoming weeks. Training, installs, renewables, design, regs, standards. So I think before we start making this an absolute monster initial hello, this is just kind of like an understanding of the kind of guff we're going to be talking about every week. Quoting regs as if we have them on the back of our eyelids. No, we're just a little bit sad. But we're passionate about what we're doing. If you have any kind of things that you want us to discuss, or if you want to, come on to a future one, we maybe get you on if we like you. Let us know. Is there anything you wanted to kind of say as a conclusion of this one?
No, it's been a very, very good hello, and obviously as it progresses, I'll get a little less robotic and more how I normally am, instead of being like yes, no.
It's always
regulation this, regulation that.
It's always a little bit nervy at first, but it's just a case of you can always try over prepare. The better thing is to just do it. If no one listens, tough. It's all right, no problem.
Yeah.
Just hand the minute. It's just you and me talking like we normally do. We record and see if anyone can benefit from the shit we talk about.
That's the main thing for the industry.
That's it, mate. And we'll try and break it into a number of little bits so we just don't get too deep into the stuff. I'll talk on the end. I'll give an E5 update if there's anything to update on. Paul has just recently gone to an earthing conference. He had to talk at the earthing conference, and from what we've seen coming in, we're going to definitely be approaching this in an upcoming one soon. But it's a case of what we like to do with E5 is get our heads in gear, and then we'll do a few at a time. So we're going to probably get some good E5 ones coming up. I predict, without really committing too much, we'll get a few recorded in the July-August area. We'll probably get a few down, I think. But we'll update you when we know a little bit more. But there's an awful lot going on in our groups and our stuff. There's an awful lot of new information coming in, which just kind of stimulates the E5-ness in all of us to try and actually figure out what the hell's going on, and what the real issues are, and how we're going to advise electricians to do things well in the future. But they'll be coming thick and thin very soon. It's just we do them in little stints, and then we kind of get back to our actual jobs, But in the meantime, you and me, we can jump on here and just talk shit, should we? That's fine with me.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, mate. Well, great talking to you, and we will conclude this one, and we'll do another one in a few days. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.
See you later.
All right.